Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I remember the summer I was 11 turning 12. My family had planned this big vacation to a lake in Alberta, and I was beyond excited. School had been rough that year. I wasn't exactly popular, and the bullies made sure I knew it. But this vacation, this was my chance to forget all that and just be a kid. The lake was beautiful, crystal clear water, soft sand, and plenty of space to explore. While my parents set up our spot on the beach with umbrellas and coolers, I wandered down to the shoreline with my plastic shovel and bucket in hand. That's when I spotted it. The perfect location. There was this collection of flat rocks extending about 10 feet into the lake, creating a natural little island. I immediately knew what I wanted to build. I spent hours on that sandcastle. Hours. The sun moved across the sky as I carefully constructed walls, packed sand, and carved details. I built 4 towers, one at each corner, and even made crenellations along the walls like real castles have. The drawbridge was my pride and joy. I found this perfect piece of driftwood that fit exactly between the shore and my castle entrance. When I was finally done, I called out to my parents to come look at what I had made. They walked over, and I could tell they were really impressed with my creation. My dad said my castle was incredible and pointed out all the details I had included. My mom commented on how creative I was for making little trees out of seaweed. Dad suggested taking a picture and headed back to our spot to grab the camera from the car. As my dad walked away and my mom returned to our beach spot, a group of teenagers appeared. They were probably 15 or 16 years old, walking down the beach with sodas in hand, laughing loudly. I didn't think much of them until one of them, a tall boy with spiky hair, nudged his friend and pointed at my sandcastle. They changed direction, heading straight toward me and my creation. The spiky-haired teen made a comment to his friend about some little kid making a sand pile. His friend responded that it was a pretty elaborate sand pile. I stood there, not sure what to do as they approached. When they got closer, the spiky-haired teen said, "My sandcastle was nice." I thanked him and told him that I had worked really hard on it. I remember hoping that maybe they genuinely thought it was cool. That hope died quickly. Without warning, the spiky-haired teen stepped onto my rock platform, pulled his leg back, and kicked my castle. Sand flew everywhere. The towers collapsed, the walls crumbled, and my beautiful drawbridge snapped in two. He sarcastically said, "Oops," as they all burst out laughing, high-fiving each other while walking away. I stood there fighting back tears. My dad returned with the camera just in time to see the destruction and my trembling lip. He asked what happened and where the castle was. I simply told him they kicked it down. My dad looked at the retreating teenagers, then back at me. I could tell he was angry, but he knelt down beside me instead of confronting them. He said sorry and that some people just don't appreciate art. Then he asked if I wanted to build another one. I nodded, wiping my eyes. I wasn't going to let them win. The next day I returned to my spot. This time, I had a plan. When I started building my new castle, I searched the shoreline until I found exactly what I needed. A jagged, heavy rock about the size of my fist. I dug a hole in what would be the base of my castle, positioned the rock so its sharp edges pointed upward, and then carefully built the castle around and over it. This castle wasn't quite as elaborate as my first one, but it was still pretty impressive. And more importantly, it had my secret defense system installed. Sure enough, the teenagers returned that afternoon. I pretended not to notice them as they approached, but I was watching from the corner of my eye. The spiky-haired teen made a comment to his friends about me rebuilding my sand pile. He added that they needed to teach another lesson about the tide coming in. His friends laughed. My parents were further down the beach this time, out of earshot but still was in view. The spiky-haired teen stepped onto my rock platform again, pulled his leg back just like before, and slammed his foot right into the center of my castle. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. There was a solid thunk sound, nothing like the soft collapse of sand. The teen's cocky smile transformed instantly into a look of shock and pain. He let out a yell that turned every head on the beach and jumped backward, tumbling off my rock platform and into the shallow water. The teen shouted in pain and asked what happened. His friend asked what was wrong. The teen, now holding his foot and rocking back and forth in the shallow water, yelled that there was something in the castle and he thought he broke his toe. His friends gathered around him, confused and concerned. I stood my ground, arms crossed, and suggested that maybe he shouldn't kick other people's stuff. The commotion drew my parents over. The teen was still moaning about his foot while his friends tried to help him stand. My dad asked what was going on. One of the teen's friends quickly told him that I had put a rock in my sandcastle, and when their friend kicked it, he hurt his foot. My dad looked at me, raising an eyebrow. I shrugged and told him that I built my castle on a rocky area, and it wasn't my fault if he didn't look where he was kicking. My dad tried to hide his smile as he turned to the injured teen. He said it sounded like a valuable lesson about respecting other people's property, then asked if the teen needed help getting to the first aid station. The teen looked at me through watery eyes but declined the offer. His friends helped him limp away, and I heard him saying something about psycho kids. For the rest of our vacation, I built several more sandcastles. Some had moats, some had bridges, and one even had a sand dragon guarding the entrance. Not a single one got kicked down. Now that I'm a teenager myself, I still think back to that moment with a smile. I'm half Korean ethnically, though I was born and raised in Australia. My friend was curious about Korean cuisine and wanted me to recommend some dishes for him and his Irish friend to try. I'd never met this Irish guy before, but I agreed to drive both of them to the restaurant. On the way there, the conversation took an uncomfortable turn. The Irish guy asked me when I had moved from Korea. I told him that I hadn't moved from anywhere, as I was born and raised in Australia, just with Korean heritage. He questioned whether I was really Korean then and asked if I even knew anything about Korea. Since I was driving, I kept my eyes on the road and just mumbled something about growing up with the culture. I didn't want to get into it while trying to navigate traffic. When we arrived at the restaurant, we sat down and looked through the menu. I tried to explain some basics about Korean food and culture. I pointed out that the metal chopsticks were traditional in Korea, unlike the wooden ones found in other Asian restaurants. I mentioned they were practical and environmentally friendly. I pointed out some dishes I thought they might enjoy, explaining ingredients and flavors. The Irish guy was scanning the menu when his eyes landed on something. He asked about a dish called jong something. I told him it was jjangukjang, a fermented soybean stew, but warned against ordering it. I described how it has an extremely strong smell that many people find overwhelming, adding that even my grandmother refuses to make it at home because of the stench. The Irish guy asked if I had even eaten it before. I admitted I hadn't personally tried it but said it's notorious for its smell. I advised against it, especially for someone not used to fermented foods. He told me to stop acting Korean and said he could handle it. He said he would order that dish. I could tell he wouldn't listen to reason, so I just shrugged and warned him not to say I didn't warn him. I changed the subject to avoid more tension, and we chatted about other things while waiting for our food. When the dishes arrived, the smell of the jjangukjang hit us immediately. I tried not to react, but the Irish guy's face said it all. He took one small spoonful, made a face, and put his spoon down. He said it was horrible and that he couldn't eat it. He called the server over and asked to order something else, saying he couldn't eat the stew. The server looked uncomfortable but nodded and took the dish away. The Irish guy ordered something safer. Bulgogi, I think, but the mood was ruined. I tried to keep the conversation light for the rest of the meal, but there was this awkward tension. When we finished eating, the Irish guy told my friend that he would take the bus with him instead of getting a ride. I offered to still drive him, saying it was no trouble, but he said he was sure about taking the bus. They left together, and I drove home alone thinking about the evening. I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. I had warned him about the dish, hadn't I? About an hour after I got home, my friend called me. My friend said the evening hadn't gone well. I agreed and asked what had happened. My friend told me that the Irish guy was upset because he thought I baited him into ordering that stinky stew as payback for his comment about me not being really Korean. I said this was ridiculous, pointing out that I had warned him not to order it. My friend said I could have been more direct about it. He said that my "don't say I didn't warn you" comment might have sounded like a challenge. I said I wasn't challenging him, but just saying a fact. I had warned him, and he had ignored me. My friend said the Irish guy was also angry because he had to pay for 2 dishes, believing I made him waste money on purpose. I asked how that could be my fault when he had insisted on ordering it despite my warning. My friend said he wasn't saying I was wrong and admitted the Irish guy was being an a-hole with those comments about me not being really Korean. He just suggested that, in the future, I should be more direct when someone's about to make a mistake. I asked whether there would even be a next time with this guy. After hanging up, I sat there feeling annoyed. Why was I being blamed for someone else's stubbornness? I had tried to help him avoid a bad experience, and he'd not only ignored my advice but questioned my cultural knowledge. The next day, my friend texted to say the Irish guy was still complaining about the Korean food incident and how I had tricked him. He was telling everyone that I'd set him up because I was pretending to be Korean and got offended. I decided not to engage with this nonsense. If someone's going to question my identity, ignore my advice, and then blame me for their poor decisions, that's not someone I need in my life. My friend eventually admitted that the guy tends to be stubborn and judgmental, and he said sorry for putting me in that position. I guess entitled people exist everywhere, even at Korean restaurants in Australia. That Thursday afternoon was supposed to be like any other. Just walking home from my physical therapy appointment, taking the scenic route through a nice neighborhood to get some extra steps in. My doctor had told me to walk more to help with my knee rehabilitation after a minor surgery last month. I was about halfway home scrolling through some photos I'd taken of a cool street mural when I heard it, that unmistakable sound of metal crunching against metal. I looked up just in time to see a shiny white SUV backing away from a parked blue sedan. The sedan's entire driver's side was crumpled in, and the side mirror was dangling by some wires. The SUV had a decent dent in its rear bumper. Without even thinking, I started recording with my phone. I don't know why. Maybe all those citizen journalist videos I've watched online had trained me to document incidents. Or maybe I just wanted evidence for the poor owner of that blue sedan. The SUV driver, a middle-aged woman with a blonde bob haircut, got out of her vehicle. She looked around frantically, then walked over to inspect the damage she'd caused to the parked car. She didn't leave a note. She didn't call anyone. She just looked around again, checking if anyone had seen what happened. That's when her eyes locked with mine across the street. I was standing there on the sidewalk, phone obviously pointed right at her. Her face changed from panic to something much darker, pure rage. She immediately asked what I was doing. I was so startled that she was talking to me that I didn't respond right away. She asked if I was filming her. I nervously said yes. I was recording because she had just hit that car and was leaving without taking responsibility. She told me to delete the footage immediately. I said I wouldn't, explaining that the car owner deserved to know what happened. This only made her angrier. She walked back to her SUV, got in, and slammed the door. I figured she was leaving the scene, which was bad, but at least I had her license plate and face on video. What I didn't expect was for her to start the engine, rev it loudly, and then suddenly swerve toward the sidewalk where I was standing. The SUV jumped the curb, tires screeching as they hit the concrete sidewalk. I stood frozen for a split second as the reality hit me. This woman was actually trying to run me over. Pure adrenaline kicked in. I dove to the right toward a streetlight pole, my phone still clutched in my hand. My knee hurt as I landed hard on the concrete, but the alternative was much worse. The woman, apparently not expecting my sudden movement, swerved too late. Her SUV slammed directly into the streetlight pole I had just jumped away from. The airbags deployed with a loud pop, and the front of her vehicle crumpled against the pole. I scrambled back further, scared she might still try to come after me, but the SUV wasn't going anywhere. Steam was rising from under the hood, and the woman looked dazed from the impact. Several people who had heard the commotion came running out of nearby houses. An older man helped me to my feet. He asked if I was okay and wanted to know what had happened. I was shaken so badly I could barely speak, but I managed to tell him that the woman had tried to hit me with her car because I recorded her hitting the parked car. Another neighbor was already on the phone with emergency services. Within about 10 minutes, which felt like hours, police and emergency medical technicians arrived at the scene. The woman was being helped out of her vehicle by the EMTs. She was conscious and seemed mostly uninjured apart from some cuts from the airbag deployment. As soon as she got her bearings, she started pointing at me. She loudly said I was harassing her and claimed I had threatened her, causing her to crash. A police officer walked up to me while others secured the scene. He asked me to explain what had happened. I was still shaking, but I held up my phone and told him I had everything recorded. I explained that she had hit the parked car, noticed me recording, and then tried to run me over before crashing into the pole. The officer looked skeptical until I showed him the video. It clearly showed the entire sequence: her hitting the parked car, our conversation, and then her driving onto the sidewalk toward me before crashing into the pole. The officer's expression changed immediately. He told me he would need a copy of that video for evidence. While I was giving my statement and sending the video to the officer, I could hear the woman still ranting. She was saying that I had filmed her without permission, which she claimed was illegal, and demanding that I be arrested instead. The officer told her that recording in public was not illegal, but trying to hit someone with a vehicle was a serious crime. She tried to claim her brakes had failed, but another officer pointed out that they had video evidence showing she drove onto the sidewalk on purpose. She then said I had faked the video. The officers looked at each other before one of them pulled out handcuffs. He told her that she was under arrest for attempted assault with a deadly weapon, leaving the scene of an accident and filing a false police report. She started protesting more as they put her in handcuffs and led her to a police car. I heard bits about her husband being a lawyer and threats to sue everyone involved. The owner of the damaged blue sedan eventually showed up after being called by the police. He was a young guy who looked like he was having the worst day of his life until the officer explained what happened and that they had caught the person responsible. The young man seemed shocked as he tried to understand the story, that someone had hit his car, tried to run over a witness, and then crashed into a pole all in daylight. When the officer confirmed this, the young man looked at me with amazement. He thanked me for capturing everything on video, saying his insurance company would never have believed this story. As the police finished taking statements and the tow trucks arrived to remove both damaged vehicles, I sat on a nearby bench, still processing what had happened. My knee was throbbing from the fall, but at least I wasn't badly hurt. One of the officers came to me before leaving. He said I would likely need to testify in court, but with the video evidence, the case should be simple. He said I had quick thinking but warned me to be careful in the future, noting that people can be unpredictable when they feel trapped. I nodded, knowing how close I'd come to being seriously injured, all because I happened to witness someone's bad decision, and they decided that getting rid of the evidence was more important than taking responsibility. 2 years ago, I was looking for a job after being laid off from my previous position at a marketing firm. The economy had taken a downturn and jobs were scarce, especially in my small city. After 3 months of sending out applications, I finally landed an interview at what I'll call a semi-public service office. The place helped people with various administrative needs, think somewhere between a government office and a community center. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady work with decent benefits, and I was in no position to be picky. During my interview, I met my potential supervisor, who seemed pleasant enough. She asked questions about my experience and skills, and I thought we had a good rapport. This was just an act she put on for the hiring process. On my first day, I was introduced to the woman who would make the next year of my life a nightmare. Let's call her Dr. Karen, since she never let anyone forget her academic credentials for more than 5 minutes. When Dr. Karen welcomed me to the office, she immediately introduced herself with her full title, making sure to mention her PhD in public administration from Harvard. She told me I'd be learning from the best. I said I was looking forward to working there. She replied by saying that as someone with a doctorate, she had high standards, and added that most people didn't understand the level of excellence she expected. This was just the beginning. Throughout my first week, I heard about her doctorate about 8 times a day. It was as if she thought the title would disappear if she didn't keep reminding everyone about it. The office had a flexible work schedule, which was one of the perks that attracted me to the job. We could work anytime between 7 o'clock a.m. and 6 o'clock p.m., as long as we completed our 8 hours. We signed in using 15-minute increments on a digital timesheet system. Most employees came in around 8:30 or 9 o'clock, but I've always been an early riser. My commute could be unpredictable, sometimes taking 45 minutes, other times only 25 if traffic was light. After a couple of weeks, I realized that on good traffic days, I could arrive by 7:30 or 7:45. I started signing in early on those days, thinking I could leave earlier too. That's when Dr. Karen called me into her office. She told me she had noticed I've been signing in before 8 o'clock a.m. I explained that sometimes traffic was good and I got there early, and I thought it would be okay since we had flexible hours. She said it wasn't okay, and while everyone else could sign in whenever they wanted, as my supervisor, she was telling me that I couldn't sign in before 8 o'clock a.m. When I asked why, since the policy said we could work between 7 o'clock and 6 o'clock, she simply said it was because she said so. She added that as someone with a doctorate, she thought she knew what was best for her department. I was baffled but tried to explain my situation again. I asked what I should do when I arrived early because of traffic. Her solution was that I could come in and check my emails and get set up for the day, but I couldn't sign in until 8 o'clock. In other words, she wanted me to work for free for up to 30 minutes each day. I nodded, not wanting to argue further, but I had no plan to give away my time for nothing. The next morning, traffic was light and I arrived at 7:40. Instead of going to my desk, I sat on a bench outside the building, reading my Kindle. A colleague walked by and looked confused. My colleague asked if I was coming in. I replied that I wouldn't be until 8 o'clock, as those were Dr. Karen's orders. The following week it was raining, so I couldn't sit outside. I went to my desk but didn't turn on my computer. Instead, I pulled out my Kindle again and continued reading the thriller I was reading. Dr. Karen walked by and saw me. She asked why I wasn't checking my emails and getting ready for the day. I explained that I wasn't on the clock until 8 o'clock as per her instructions, and I didn't think it would be right to do work-related tasks while not being paid. She couldn't argue with her own logic. She walked off to her office and slammed the door. This pattern continued for several weeks. If I arrived early, I would either sit outside or at my desk, openly reading or playing games on my phone. I made a point of checking the time and only turning on my computer precisely at 8 o'clock, not a minute before. The other staff started noticing this routine and word got around about Dr. Karen's rule that only applied to me. Some colleagues gave me looks, while others seemed amused by my small act of rebellion. Then came the day of vindication. Dr. Karen's boss, the department director, needed to collect some urgent documents that Dr. Karen had left for him. He came by the office at 7:45 one morning, expecting to find it open and running. I was sitting at my desk, reading my Kindle as usual. The director looked confused when he saw me sitting there with my computer off. The director greeted me and said that he needed to pick up some documents that Dr. Karen had left for him, asking if I could help. I told him that I wasn't allowed to start working until 8 o'clock, as Dr. Karen had told me not to sign in before then. He said that the office had flexible hours starting at 7 o'clock. I told him this was true for everyone else, but explained that Dr. Karen had created a rule just for me. The director asked to see this rule. I pulled out my phone and showed him the email Dr. Karen had sent me, saying that I was not to sign in before 8 o'clock a.m. regardless of when I arrived at the office. He said he would have to wait until 8 o'clock then. He sat down in the waiting area. At exactly 8 o'clock, I turned on my computer, signed in, and helped the director find his documents. Later that day, Dr. Karen walked up to my desk. She asked why I hadn't helped the director that morning, adding that he had complained about having to wait because of me. I reminded her that I was following her instructions not to start work before 8 o'clock. I mentioned I had the emails to prove it and offered to forward them to the director to clear up any confusion. She knew she'd been caught in her own power play, and there was nothing she could do about it. She turned around without another word and walked away. 2 weeks later, the department announced a new policy. All supervisors' special scheduling instructions needed to be approved by the director first, and Dr. Karen told me that upon further consideration, I could now work the same flexible schedule as everyone else. Yesterday was supposed to be a simple errand run. I had just finished a double shift at the hospital where I work as a nurse, and all I wanted was to grab some chocolate to reward myself before heading home to crash. My scrubs were in my bag since I'd changed into jeans and a red t-shirt after my shift. Big mistake, as I would soon find out. I walked into Walgreens making a beeline for the candy aisle. It was oddly quiet, that weird limbo time around 8:30 p.m. when the store was still open but seemed empty. I was standing there, deciding between a Snickers and a Reese's cup, when I felt someone behind me. A sharp voice behind me asked where the sale items from the flyer were. I turned around to find a middle-aged woman with a bob haircut with side-swept bangs staring at me. She was holding a Walgreens sales flyer in one hand and her purse in the other. I told her that I didn't work there and turned back to the candy. The woman tapped my shoulder and asked about Hershey bars that were supposed to be buy one, get one free, saying the sign didn't show that. I turned around again and said that I didn't work at the store, that I was just a customer. She looked me up and down, then asked why I was checking the displays if I didn't work there. She said that she needed to know if the candy bars were on sale. I told her that I was checking displays because I wanted to buy candy just like any other customer would. I said again that I didn't work at Walgreens. Karen then asked if I could at least check for her because the sign was confusing. I looked around the store and noticed there wasn't an employee in sight. The register area was empty, and there wasn't anyone stocking shelves. I suggested that she try the front counter and that someone might be in the back. She said that she had already tried and no one was there. She said I looked like I knew where things were. I sighed and said that was only because I was shopping for candy in the candy aisle, where candy is located. She crossed her arms and told me not to get smart with her. She said she was a regular customer who deserved proper service. I told her that customers deserve service from employees, not from other customers, and said again that I didn't work there. Karen then asked if I was on break, suggesting that even if I was, I should still help customers. My frustration grew as I stated that I wasn't on break because I had never worked at Walgreens. I said that I was a nurse at Memorial Hospital who had stopped to buy chocolate after my shift. She looked at me for a moment before pointing out that I was wearing a red shirt, and Walgreens employees wear red. I looked down at my plain red t-shirt and said that it was just a regular shirt, nothing like the Walgreens uniforms that have name tags and logos. I told her again that I was just a customer like her. Karen told me she didn't have time for this because her husband was waiting in the car and she just needed to know if the items were on sale. I said that I didn't have time either, having been on my feet for 12 hours taking care of patients. All I wanted was to buy chocolate and go home. I said once more that I didn't work there. She stepped closer and said she would report me for my attitude. I asked her who she would report me to since I didn't work there. She said she would contact corporate because she knew the district manager. I threw my hands up and told her to go ahead and report that a random customer in a red t-shirt wouldn't help her, adding that they would surely care. By this point, I had said I don't work here at least a dozen times, but she either wasn't getting it or was choosing not to. Either way, I was done with the conversation. I started to walk away, but she followed me, saying I couldn't just walk away when a customer needed help. I told her to watch me and said for what felt like the 20th time that I didn't work there. I spotted movement near the pharmacy counter, an actual employee coming from the back room. I pointed this out to her, saying there was an actual employee she could ask. The woman stood there for a moment, looking between me and the uniformed employee who was now arranging something at the counter. Karen said she would speak with the employee but said my customer service skills were bad and told me not to expect a good review. I nearly shouted that I didn't expect any review because I didn't work there. The actual employee noticed us and asked if everything was okay. I waved him over and said that the lady had questions about the candy sale. The employee walked over, name tag clearly visible, wearing the proper Walgreens uniform. Karen switched to a sweet tone, telling the employee she was thankful he was there because I had been refusing to help her with the sales prices. The employee looked at me confused, and I simply said that I was just a customer and had told her that multiple times. The employee said sorry for the confusion and asked how he could help her. While Karen explained her sale question to the real employee, I quickly grabbed my Snickers bar and headed to the register. The employee shot me a sorry look as I paid for my candy. As I was leaving, I heard Karen telling the employee about how rude the woman in the red shirt had been. The employee tried to explain again that I didn't work there, that I was just another customer. Karen said that I should have helped her anyway. The absurdity of it all made me laugh as I walked to my car. The nerve of some people is truly astounding. The entitlement to demand help from a random stranger, then get upset when they can't give it to you. And even after being told 20 times that I wasn't an employee, it's jarring and unsettling how some people operate in our society. Common sense really isn't common anymore. At least I got my chocolate. I need to get this off my chest because it's still bugging me days later. For some background, I'm a 32-year-old guy who recently had foot surgery. The doctor put me in this bulky medical boot that makes walking any significant distance pretty painful. Not exactly how I plan to spend my spring, but I'm dealing with it. The worst part is the simple things that become challenging, like grocery shopping. Since the surgery, I've been using those electric mobility carts at stores. You know the ones, they're meant for people who have difficulty walking around the store. I never thought I'd need one in my 30s, but here we are. I'm not going to struggle through an entire grocery trip in pain when there's an alternative available. So yesterday, I went to the Publix near my apartment. I limped my way into the store, found one of the electric carts by the entrance, and started my shopping. Everything was going fine. I picked up what I needed, paid, and was heading out of the store toward the parking lot. I was almost to the crosswalk when I heard someone yelling behind me. At first, I ignored it because, well, people yell in public for all kinds of reasons that have nothing to do with me. But then the voice got louder and closer. I could hear an older woman shouting at me, demanding to know where I was going with the car because she needed it. I looked back and saw this woman, probably in her 60s, glaring at me. There were 3 other identical electric carts right inside the entrance where she was standing. But she had decided that my cart, the one I was currently using, was the only acceptable option. I partially turned around, trying to be polite despite her tone. I told her that I needed the cart. She shot back that she needed the cart. I was getting irritated at this point, but I still tried to handle it maturely. I simply extended my leg with the medical boot on it so she could see it. I figured that would end the conversation right there. It didn't. The woman asked me if I couldn't walk. I simply told her no. That's all I said. I was too annoyed to explain, and I didn't owe her details about my medical situation. I turned away and continued toward my car, hearing her huffing as I left. The whole interaction probably lasted less than 30 seconds, but it's been stuck in my head ever since. Why do some people think it's okay to yell at strangers in public? I'm a grown adult trying to navigate life with a temporary disability, and there I was being questioned in a grocery store parking lot. What makes it even more frustrating was that there were plenty of other carts available. She didn't have to wait for mine. She just saw someone younger using one and decided I must be taking advantage of the system, as if these carts are only for people of a certain age bracket. I was raised to be respectful, especially to older folks, but in the moment, I was genuinely pissed off. Why was she bothering me at all? Would she have done the same to an elderly person using the cart? Probably not. I know I shouldn't let it get to me, but there's something upsetting about having your disability questioned in public. I'm not asking for special treatment, just a basic accommodation the store provides for people who have difficulty walking. The more I think about it, the more I realize this is probably something people with invisible disabilities deal with constantly. At least I have a visible boot that shows something's wrong, even if it didn't convince this woman. I can't imagine dealing with this kind of scrutiny when your disability isn't obvious. I did consider going back and talking to her more directly, explaining that my recent surgery makes walking painful and pointing out the other available cards, but decided it wasn't worth the energy. Some people are just determined to be entitled, and nothing I could say would change that. As I drove home, still irritated by the whole encounter, I realized something that made me feel a bit better. The store manager had watched the entire exchange. As I was loading my groceries into my car, he came over and said sorry for what happened. He told me he'd talked to the woman about proper behavior in their store and told me I was right to use the card. I thanked him, though I was still shaken by the confrontation. It was nice to have someone say I wasn't in the wrong, especially since I'd been second-guessing myself. 6 months ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. My roommate brought in this woman who needed the place to stay temporarily. She seemed nice enough at first, quiet, kept to herself, and paid a fraction of what we were all paying in rent since she wasn't officially on the lease. We were just trying to help someone out, you know? I had been planning to move out anyway. My job was taking me to another city, and I needed someone to take over my part of the lease. This woman seemed like the perfect solution. She had been staying with us already, knew the place, and was eager to make it official. I should have seen the red flags. This woman barely works, maybe 20 hours a week at a sandwich shop. Meanwhile, she's on welfare, has her childcare completely covered by the state, and gets free health care. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for social programs when people really need them, but she acts like the government owes her everything. At least once a week, I'd hear her on the phone with state workers screaming at them about her benefits. She would demand to know why her child care voucher hadn't been processed yet, insisting it was unacceptable and that she had rights. She would always ask to speak to supervisors. I felt bad for whoever was on the other end of those calls. She'd go on about how they were incompetent and how she deserved more, all while my other roommates and I worked full-time jobs and had a fraction of the resources she did. But the real nightmare began when the lease transfer papers arrived. The ink wasn't even dry and suddenly she changed into some kind of dictatorial landlord. She started rearranging furniture without asking anyone. The dining room looked like a furniture warehouse with half our stuff piled in the middle. I came home from work yesterday to find her scrubbing the walls with bleach. The smell was overwhelming. When I asked her what she was doing and mentioned the strong bleach smell, she told me the place was filthy and no one cleaned properly. She said she was just doing what should have been done months ago. When I pointed out that she wasn't officially on the lease until June and couldn't just take over like this, she dismissed my concerns, saying that since she was going to be on the lease soon, we might as well get things in order now. Then I noticed a box in the corner. My things. She had packed up an entire shelf of my belongings without asking. I started going through it and realized some items were missing altogether. When I asked about my vintage record player and collection of signed books, she said she had moved them somewhere safe because the shelf was a mess. I told her she had no right to touch my things and asked where she put them. She told me not to use that tone with her and said she was doing everyone a favor by organizing the place. She suggested I should be thanking her. I went to talk to my roommate who had brought her in. I asked if he had seen what she was doing and how she was taking over the house. He said that she had been on his case about cleaning too and had lectured him about proper bathroom cleaning the day before. When I asked if he was just going to let her do this, especially after she packed up my stuff without asking, he said maybe it was better to just keep the peace, since she was going to be on the lease soon. Keep the peace? This woman was on a power trip. She had already submitted maintenance requests to our landlord citing apartment codes and regulations. She wasn't even officially a tenant yet. Later that evening, I found her reorganizing the kitchen cabinets. I asked her to stop moving everything around, explaining that we had a system that worked for everyone. She said our system was inefficient and that she had studied proper kitchen organization. She said her way would be much better. When I pointed out that none of us could find anything now and that she didn't even ask if it was okay, she said that since she was paying rent now, she had just as much right to the space as anyone else. I reminded her that she wasn't paying full rent yet and wouldn't be on the lease until June. She said she had already signed the papers and it was just a matter of time. She then said the place needed someone to take charge, because we had all been living like slobs. We had let her stay with us for next to nothing for 6 months. We had been doing her a favor, and now she was treating us like we were the problem. I tried talking to my other roommates, but they seemed resigned to their fate. She had somehow intimidated them into submission. It was like watching someone with Stockholm Syndrome. When I said we couldn't just let her take over like this and that, she was acting like she owned the place. One roommate said that maybe she knew something we didn't since she kept quoting tenant rights and apartment regulations. I tried to make them see that she was manipulating all of us. She'd been here 6 months paying barely anything, and now she was acting like the queen of the castle. The next morning I woke up to find her knocking on my door at 7 a.m. She told me that she had made a cleaning schedule for everyone and that I was responsible for mopping all the floors on Tuesdays and Thursdays. When I asked if she was serious and pointed out that I never agreed to this, she said that everyone needed to pull their weight and that she had seen that I rarely cleaned the common areas. I said I've been working overtime to save for my move and that I cleaned plenty. She said I didn't clean to proper standards, and then talked about my guests being too loud and disruptive. I'd had it. This woman was on welfare, barely working, getting all kinds of government assistance, and had the nerve to tell us how we should live in our own apartment. The apartment we had welcomed her into when she needed help. I decided to take action. If my roommates wouldn't stand up to her, I would. I contacted our landlord directly. When I called, I told the landlord I wanted to discuss the lease transfer that was in process. The landlord said they had received the paperwork and asked if there was an issue. I said yes and explained everything. The rearranging, the packing up of my belongings, the bleaching of walls, the controlling behavior. The landlord seemed concerned and told me she didn't have any authority to do that. He also mentioned that the maintenance requests she submitted cited regulations that didn't even apply to our building, and he was planning to call about that. When I said she was also intimidating the other tenants and taking over common spaces, the landlord offered to void the papers and find someone else if I wanted to reconsider the transfer. It was tempting, but I really needed to move for my new job. And then I had an idea. 2 days later, she was in the middle of another reorganization project when there was a knock at the door. It was the landlord and the property manager. They told her they needed to discuss the lease transfer and the unauthorized changes she'd been making to the apartment. She tried to defend herself, saying she was just cleaning and organizing because the place was a disaster. When the property manager said they'd received complaints about her removing other tenants' belongings without permission and making changes to the property structure, she called it ridiculous and said she was just trying to bring the place up to code. The landlord then told her that they had reviewed the codes she cited in her maintenance requests, and they didn't apply to this building. He also pointed out that until June 1st, she wasn't an official tenant, and they'd been told she'd been staying there off-lease for 6 months. Her face went pale when he said this was against the current lease agreement, because everyone on the premises must be on the lease. When she protested that she was going to be on the lease soon, the landlord told her they had decided to void the transfer agreement and were giving her notice that she needed to vacate the premises within 48 hours. She tried to argue that she had rights, but the property manager shut her down, explaining that without a lease, she didn't have tenant rights and was trespassing. All that entitlement drained away as she realized she had overplayed her hand. I may still be moving out, but at least I won't be leaving my roommates to deal with her tyranny. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.